Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Well, with each passing day, increasingly, the world is headed toward catastrophe. And why do I say that? Well, primarily from this article from yesterday in Zero Hedge. It says German foreign minister just said the quiet part out loud on Ukraine. And we're going to talk about what happened then, what's happening. We've talked about this in the past, and this need to escalate tensions between Ukraine, NATO, United States, Russia, all of these different nations, and what that could potentially mean. So we're going to talk about that today. Anyway, this article goes on. It says German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock bluntly stated in fresh remarks that Western allies are fighting a war against Russia. The remarks came during a debate at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe on Tuesday amid discussions over sending Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. While Baerbock's words were largely ignored in mainstream media, a number of pundits on social media noted with alarm that the German foreign minister, so keep in mind this is not a city council member, the German foreign minister, a very high-ranking German government official, just essentially declared war on Russia. Goes on, it says, ironically, other German officials have long sought to emphasize their country is not a party to the conflict, fearing uncontrollable escalation. And I would say rightly fearing uncontrollable escalation, because these things have been war-gamed out in the past, and that is the primary issue, the primary risk in a conflict like this. It says, contradicting this official stance, Baerbock said the quiet part out loud and introduced the comments with, and therefore, I've said already in the last days, yes, we have to do more to defend Ukraine. Yes, we have to do more also on tanks. And that's when she asserted, but the most important part and the most crucial part is that we do it together and that we do not do the blame game in Europe, because we are fighting a war against Russia and not against each other. So there you have it right there. It's very, very clear what the intent is. And even if she's saying, oh, well, that's not what I meant, that's what Russia just heard. And it's going to escalate this situation. It goes on. It says Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova seized on the comments, saying, this is yet more proof that the Western allies were planning a war on Russia all along. If we add this to Merkel's revelations that they were strengthening Ukraine and did not count on the Minsk agreements, then we are talking about a war against Russia that was planned in advance. Don't say later that we didn't warn you, Zakharova says. And I want to emphasize that Russia has been very clear over the past 10, 11 months. They've said, stop poking us, stop putting that stick in our eye to the United States, to NATO, and yet there seems to be this escalation in the conflict. And we're not dealing with, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan. We're dealing with Russia, which has enough nuclear weapons to destroy the entire planet. So it goes, we go on. It says one thing is for sure: things are moving fast. More tanks and support to Ukraine, 3 additional B-52 bombers flying to unknown locations, Russian warships with hypersonic missiles in the Atlantic, no attempts at negotiating peace. If you didn't recognize the end game last February, do you now? Pray for humanity. That's a tweet that's quoted here in the Zero Hedge article. Now, we need to pray. We need to be always praying for peace, praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Are we going to have a global war, an all-out nuclear war that destroys all life on Earth? No. I'm not gonna dance around that issue. No, we are not going to have that, because the Bible makes it very clear what the events are in the end times that play out. And in those events, there is no indication that humanity engages in an all-out nuclear war that destroys all life on Earth, or even, and we won't necessarily get into this video today, but that Jesus has to come back to prevent that from happening, which is a common theme I hear people talk about. The Battle of Armageddon is about something much more different than that, much more sinister, in fact. You can go back in past videos and watch that. But that doesn't mean that there can't be a limited exchange. And the Bible does state that there will be a World War III. We read about that in Revelation 6. The rider on the red horse brings war and slaughter to the entire globe. That is the definition of a world war. So while many people have said, well, World War III won't occur because of mutually assured destruction, that is not the case. And World War III, against all conventional wisdom, is a winnable war because we know that the Antichrist controls the earth in the aftermath, some period after that war takes place. So the idea that there can't be a World War III, that humanity won't survive it, is false. The Bible tells us the exact opposite. So all that said, when these things occur, this just escalates the conflict. And back in 2019, I believe the United States did a war game on this very scenario, a Russian invasion of Ukraine and what would happen. And in that war game, both sides began an escalation they couldn't back down from, and it led to limited use of nuclear weapons and over 1 billion with a B, people dead as a result. So this is not being taken with the seriousness in the mainstream news that it should be. It's not being taken with the seriousness in the United States and Europe, where these types of things should be debated. And we should be asking questions, is this what we're willing to sacrifice for Ukraine? Because I would ask the question, and this is just my political opinion, but if Ukraine is worth risking nuclear war over, why were they not a part of NATO prior to this? Why are they not a part of NATO? They've had 30 years to join NATO, but they didn't do that. So clearly, this wasn't the top priority of the United States or NATO. So why now? Why is this happening now? But they continue to escalate and push the envelope, and I would say it's because we have unserious leaders that don't understand history. And here's where the escalation goes. This is from the U.S. Sun. It's titled, Putin's allies call for Berlin to be nuked after Germany's game-changing decision to send Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. And when people hear stuff like this, they say, oh, this is just bluster. They don't really mean it. Keep in mind, 1 year ago, most people were saying that about a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Oh, it's just talk. They're trying to get some concessions. They're trying to bring people to the negotiating table. They won't actually invade. And then they did. So I would listen to, at least take into account what Russia is trying to tell the world. It says, fuming Kremlin propagandists threaten nuclear strikes on the West today after Germany agreed to send tanks to Ukraine. And again, just went over this, I think, in the last video. I want news. I want the news to be reported. I don't need adjectives like fuming put in there. I can figure that out for myself. But they continue to crop up. That's just the world we live in today. It says, one high-profile Putin mouthpiece demanded Berlin's Bundestag parliament should be reduced to radioactive ash in retaliation. Here we see some pictures. It says, it comes after, and here we go again, dithering German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Why can't you just say it comes after German Chancellor Olaf Scholz folded to international pressure? These are loaded words trying to present the viewpoint of the author rather than the actual, what's happening. Report the news. And direct pleas from President Volodymyr Zelensky. He will now send a squadron of Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine and allow NATO allies to re-export dozens more. The Kremlin today hit back, saying any tanks supplied by Germany and the US will burn like all the rest. And raging Moscow TV pundit Yevgeny Satanovsky, can't make this stuff up, said warheads should be launched on the center of German democracy. He said German tanks with crosses on their armor will again march across Ukraine, attacking Russian soldiers. I have a natural reaction to this. The Soviet Union bombed Berlin in 1941, and to me this is a signal that the Reichstag, or Bundestag, which now replaces the Reichstag, simply should not remain standing any longer. Flat, slightly radioactive, melted down ground will remain in its place. So we're getting escalation from both sides, just as this war game a few years ago foreshadowed could occur in this type of scenario. And we're seeing all these different nations going down this pathway, very reminiscent of World War I. Everybody thinks they're going to win easily, they're going to defeat their enemies easily. This is no big deal. We can pull back at the last second. We can undo these things. It's really playing with fire. And again, it makes me question the seriousness of the leaders involved, frankly. But this goes on. Here we have from Yahoo News, citing a Reuters story. It says, Russia says tank promises show direct and growing Western involvement in Ukraine. And I would add that if it's true that Germany is going to supply these tanks, and I believe Biden came out yesterday, I think it was, and promised 31 Abrams tanks would be sent, then if that is true and it's not just symbolic and they're saying it, or they're not just going to sit them there and they aren't operational in the field, then yes, it is a direct and growing Western involvement, direct involvement in Ukraine, because you can't just sit these tanks and have them operate in the field. They require a long supply chain, numerous support vehicles. They need to be resupplied with fuel and ammunition and all sorts of maintenance inputs. You're talking, there's no way they can just hand these tanks over to Ukrainians and have them have any impact on the battlefield whatsoever. You're going to have members of the German military, members of the United States military on the ground in support of these tanks in Ukraine for them to be effective in any way, shape, or form. So it would be a direct and growing involvement and escalate the war in a major way. So this goes on. It says, Russia said on Thursday it saw the promised delivery of Western tanks to Ukraine as evidence of direct and growing U.S. and European involvement in the conflict. The Kremlin was reacting for the first time to announcements by the United States and Germany on Wednesday that they would arm Ukraine with dozens of battle tanks in its fight against Russia. There are constant statements from European capitals and Washington that the sending of various weapon systems to Ukraine, including tanks, in no way signifies the involvement of these countries or the alliance in hostilities in Ukraine, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters. And I would ask, would those countries feel the same way if the situation was reversed? I don't think they would. It says, we categorically disagree with this, and in Moscow, everything that the alliance and the capitals I mentioned are doing is seen as direct involvement in the conflict. We see that this is growing. So guys, what did we read about in the story before this? Don't say we didn't warn you. It's what Russia said. So again, is this where the world wants to say, no more, we're willing to destroy ourselves over this conflict? I realize, terrible things are happening in Ukraine. I don't want those things to happen. I wish those things weren't happening. But much, much worse is going to happen if both sides continue to escalate this conflict. Again, I don't think this is going to be World War III. I know for sure that humanity will not be destroyed as a result of this conflict, but you could nevertheless see a lot of people, exponentially more people than have lost their lives already, could lose their lives if this continues to ratchet up. And that leads us right into this next story from USA Today. It says, Doomsday Clock 2023 says the world is closer than ever to global catastrophe. It says the world is closer to annihilation than it has ever been since the first nuclear bombs were released at the close of World War II, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists said Tuesday. The time on the Doomsday Clock moved forward from 100 seconds to midnight to 90 seconds to midnight. Now, this is a clock that they've put out since the late 1940s, and they're saying it's the closest to midnight as it's ever been. I would agree, not for the reasons they necessarily state, but because we see the world stage set for the tribulation period and the events of the tribulation to occur at any time. And I don't think they necessarily realize that here. But it says, it's a reset of what has come to be known as the Doomsday Clock, a decades-long project of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists featuring a clock face where midnight represents Armageddon. And again, they're using Armageddon in terms of an all-out nuclear war that destroys the human race. That's not what Armageddon is about. We are racing toward Armageddon as we speak, but it's a much different conflict than that. But what they're saying here is this is a big deal. It's a big threat. It says, between Russia's nuclear brinksmanship and its war on Ukraine, the real threats of climate change, well, the bulletin chose to set the clock the closest to midnight yet. So again, this is more of a PR effort. They don't know how close we are to any of this thing happening. They make their pronouncements. It's their opinion. But I think it is a good thing to raise the issue in public so that people can talk about, do we want to do this, rather than just sort of going along with it. Well, our trusted leaders will show us the way. No, I think they're in the process of escalating this into a nuclear conflict, which is going to lead to absolute catastrophe on the world stage. So, where does all this fit in Bible prophecy? Well, Jesus told us that there would be wars and rumors of wars just before his return. And again, we're seeing the signs Jesus said to look for when his followers said, what are the signs of your coming and the establishment of your kingdom? So they're not talking about the rapture here, which is going to come before the tribulation. They're talking about, when are you coming back, your glorious appearing at the end of the tribulation and setting up your earthly kingdom? And he talked about certain things to look for, and we see many of those things already fulfilled. We see some unfulfilled, but the stage set for them to be fulfilled. I would place in what he's saying, what the Old Testament prophets said about the tribulation period, what John says in the book of Revelation about the tribulation period. And again, our generation is witness to certain things that no other generation could point to in terms of either fulfillment of those prophecies or seeing the stage set for the imminent fulfillment of those prophecies. And that tells me we are very close to the 7-year tribulation period. And Jesus himself, he said, when you see all these things, meaning the convergence of the signs, know that I am near. I'm right at the door. Your salvation draws near. So keep in mind, Jesus didn't say, unless they repent, the world repents like Nineveh did, and then I'll change my mind. He also didn't say, when you see all those things, maybe I'll come back in a couple hundred years or so. No, he said, I'm near, I'm right at the door. So guys, how near that is, I do not know, but we are in that time where we are seeing all of these signs converging. Every day there seems to be more and more and more. This is just the latest, this need that these powers, these nations feel to escalate this conflict into a possible nuclear war. I don't know what else to tell you other than we live in the season of the Lord's return, and this is just a prime example that that's the case. We see so many other signs. We've been over those in past videos. Won't get into all of those here today. But guys, we live in the season of the Lord's return, so don't focus on some of this doom and gloom stuff in the media, because again, as I told you, the Bible is very clear. Humanity will not be destroyed by nuclear war. So that's not something that anybody has to worry about. But what people should be worrying about is, what is your relationship with Jesus Christ? Because one day we will all face judgment. Will you be on your own on Judgment Day, or will you say, Jesus died for me on the cross as forgiveness of my sins so that I could be made right with God and be reconciled with God? That's where I'll be. That's where I hope that you are too. That is the most important thing, far more important than any of these events we see happening. But we see these events just every day in the news. And if you haven't woken up already, it is time to wake up to the times in which we live. And most important in that is making sure you have the right relationship with Jesus Christ, that you are on his side, that you have accepted his free gift of salvation. That's the most important thing you can do. And then fix your eyes on him and go to work doing the work that God gave you. Occupy yourself with that work until he either comes in the rapture or comes for us personally in some way. I mean, none of us know which day will be our last. But there will come a time when we run out of days, whether that's through our own death or through the rapture. There will come a time when we'll run out of time to be able to spread the gospel. So make sure that you're doing that every opportunity you have. So what do you think? Leave your comments below. Maybe I'm way off base, and the world should just go to war over Ukraine and let it all. But I just think this shows how terrible our leadership is all around the world, that we would be doing this. But what will we expect? Mankind is fallen. We're fallen. Everyone is filled with sin, right? So not one of us is without sin. So that's why we need Jesus, is because of this world in which we live. So it should come as no surprise, yet it still does to me sometimes. So what do you think? Leave your comments below. Make sure to like and share this. God willing, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.